If there is any novel that I can confidently point at and say, this is one of my most favorite light novels, or at least the top 3, then Overgeared is probably in that top 3 because of just the monumental importance it has to me as being one of the first light novels that I have read. I am not saying it is in my top 3 just because it is one of the first light novels that I read, because this novel genuinely does have good qualities despite the low ratings it may have on novel review websites. I love this novel mainly because it has an amazing world filled with a rich abundance of characters, and most of all, it has a main character who not only grows in terms of power, but in terms of being an actual human being, a functioning member of society. However, it's also because of this main character that I have grown to love over hundreds of chapters that people really hate this novel and or just drop it outright. Most people hate Grid because in the beginning, he is selfish, he is greedy, he's the lowliest of low, he's cowardly, and he doesn't have any intellect. Some people call Grid a coward because in the beginning of the novel or story, he refuses to help a lot of people such as Doran and Khan. And were it not for the game and its quest system forcing Grid to help these people, then Grid would have probably never ended up helping these people. Furthermore, in the beginning, he also refused to help Piero with his quest because he didn't think he was strong enough, as Grid constantly deals with a lack of courage or a lack of self-confidence. Honestly, all these accusations against Grid are justified. I'm not going to be a white knight here and defend Grid like he's a perfect human being, because he really isn't, and that's the charm of his character. That's the point. No matter how cliche this may sound, I love Grid because of all his imperfections. In creating Grid, Park Sen-il didn't hold back at all, and it just really makes Grid feel as real as possible, or as real as anyone would be in the situation that Grid grew up in. Growing up, Grid was bullied and treated horribly by everyone around him except for his family, and perhaps were it not for his family, he probably would have walked down a similar path to Agnes, a very similar character in the novel who has such a tragic past, a very extremely tragic past, probably even worse than Grid. But returning to Grid, because of this treatment by the world and those around him, it can be understood why Grid cares little to none about those around him at first, because all that the world has really thrown at him was nothing but hatred in his life. And because of this, Grid most likely formed a mindset that everyone around him didn't care for him. So in turn, why should he go out of his way to help those in need when he himself got nothing from the world except pain? I'm not saying this is a good mindset or mentality to have. I'm just explaining that this is the very, very self-destructive philosophy that Grid started out with in the novel. With this mindset, he didn't really want to provide help to anyone around him. And in fact, he probably even felt good when others suffered, because in a way, when they're suffering, to him, they're finally experiencing what it has been like for him in his whole entire life, dealing with all the hardships. Something else that most likely compounded to Grid's self-destructive philosophy, as well as his hatred of the world around him, was most likely the fact that no one really ever reached out to him, whether it be to try and help him with his problems or even just to provide him with companionship, as no one really acknowledged Grid's existence unless either they wanted to make fun of Grid or feel better about themselves by looking at someone that is, to their understanding, more pitiful than them. It's most likely because of all these things combined together that Grid ultimately decided to abandon the real world in order to take the gamble with Satisfy. In the process, Grid went into immense financial debt, and the ridicule that he received from his classmates increased to a level further than it was prior, because no matter what they did in life, from their perspective, they couldn't get as sad or pitiful as Grid, even if they tried. Ignoring the financial debt that Grid is in, and ignoring the ridicule from his classmates and schoolmates that Grid receives, his family started to be extremely disappointed in him because of the decisions that Grid was making. In their perspective, Grid was throwing away his life in order to play games and chase a childish fantasy. In the end, we see that Grid's gamble pays off, or should I say in the beginning, because our story starts with Grid as he becomes Pagma's descendant and his life starts to slowly take a turn for the better. What I want to do by telling you all of this is to try and make Grid more understandable for those who may have dropped the novel or just dislike Grid to this day. In the beginning, Grid is a product of the world around him. Unlike his counterpart, Weed, that people really love to compare him to, he isn't as intelligent or as skilled in video games or in anything in general. However, a similarity that both of them do share is that they've grown up with debt or have dealt with debt in one way or another, which caused them to both form an innate sense of stinginess or greed. Perhaps in Grid's situation, his greed even outweighs that of Weed's because he desperately wants to prove those that doubted him wrong, and sadly, this group of doubters even includes his own family. On the belief that Grid is dumb and or cowardly, I have to disagree. In terms of his intellect, Grid is definitely not the brightest in the room, but neither is he the dimmest. When he first became Pagma's descendant, he immediately researched on blacksmithing, and because of this, he was able to smoothly start his production progress. When he is given requests, he doesn't blindly jump into them or take them, but he carefully considers the risk involved, which is why some people consider him cowardly. Some people may also dislike Grid because they see him as just a lucky Gary Stu that didn't have to work for anything in order to get to where he is. And I honestly don't understand how people can think like that, because Grid clearly had to work to get to where he is. He spent over 3 months sleeplessly searching for Pagma's book in order to obtain it, and before he could even become Pagma's descendant, he was in a continual loop of increasing debt as he could not pay off his monthly Satisfy fee with the meager pay he received from the job center. Even after becoming Pagma's descendant, his luck didn't even turn for the better as he barely even got anything above a rare, even with him spending anywhere from 6 to 20 hours on the items he created. His luck was so bad to the point that the developers even thought of increasing Grid's chance to create epic and above rated items. Instead of luck, it's usually effort that gets Grid high rated items in the series, as when it matters the most, Grid usually pours out his heart, his soul, everything, and that's usually what works out for him rather than just sheer dumb blind luck. All in all, one of the biggest strengths, as opposed to what some people may think is the weakest aspects of Overgeared, is, in my honest opinion, Grid's character and his growth throughout the novel. Most people who complain about Grid and the quality of the novel usually have read under 100 chapters of it, and it's honestly a shame as they miss out on so much amazing and emotional content. Nonetheless, 4 years after I first read Overgeared, I still love this novel. I still have fond memories of the novel, and looking back on the names of some characters, it's so obvious that the creator of the novel just named his characters off of League of Legends players. But that aside, in making this video, I hope that I was able to reach out to others who enjoyed the novel as well, or as much as I do, and or maybe I even accomplished the goal of me making this video, which was to reach out to people who may have disliked Grid's character in order to perhaps make them more skeptical or at least more willing to give the novel a second chance. With that, thank you so much for watching the video till the end. I hope you enjoyed your stay, and I'll see you guys next time.